Okay, parents, especially my dads, listen to this incredible conversation I just had with Jeremy Pryor. Are you seeking to find purpose and passion and mission for your family? Man, you do not need to miss this conversation. Here's my friend Jeremy. Welcome to the Family Table. I'm Matthew Eford. Join me as I speak with parents, caregivers, and family experts about the joys and challenges of family life. We'll share the stories, advice, and insights that will help you build a loving and resilient family. Pull up a chair and join us at the family table. Welcome, everybody, to the family table. I'm your host, Matthew Eford, and I'm so excited for you to pull up a seat at the table with Jeremy Pryor and I today. Jeremy and I got connected through a mutual friend, and I'm so excited to have this conversation about what parenthood, how we can invest in our kids, and as men, how we can grow. So, Jeremy, for those who may not know you, if you come on, introduce yourself, just real quick, briefly, tell us about yourself and your family.
Hey, Matthew. Yeah, excited to be here. Yeah, so I have 5 kids, 3 grandkids. So a couple of a son-in-law and a two son-in-laws now. We just had our third child married and a daughter-in-law. So that's our family. We live in there's 4 generations of us living on the same street here in Fort Thomas, Kentucky, just south of Cincinnati.
I
So my
love
parents
that.
live here in our house, and yeah, we've had our kids and our grandkids live with us different seasons. But yeah, my daughter now lives across the street. So we all start businesses together, do ministry together. Yeah, our family is one big experiment in integration. Like, can you integrate
Okay.
all these things like business, family, fun, and certainly ministry? So yeah, that's been our lives ever since I met my wife in Jerusalem in 1997. Saw a different way of thinking about family from some Jewish and Arab dads, and it blew my mind, and I've never gotten over it.
Wow. Okay. So let's we're kindred spirits in that. We're actually in the
Okay,
process of buying land as a family, for
nice.
to have multiple generations on the same piece of land. So I'm super excited about that. By the time this comes out, we will actually have purchased that and be in the process of moving towards that, which is super exciting.
So good.
Also, we work together as a family. We have a couple of different family businesses that we're part of for multiple generations. Trying to get our
Mm.
kids integrated in with that. My oldest is 7, and he definitely has a business mind. I love the way to see that the Lord has wired his mind. We're
Mm.
we're trying to steward that well, right? But talk to me about this experience that you had overseas. What was
Mm.
that so radically changed you?
Yeah, so I grew up in Seattle. So this was kind of famously the first place in the country that had more dogs than children. There was just
Okay.
so much brokenness with family. I grew up in a really healthy home, but I was totally surrounded by brokenness. And I was a youth pastor, mostly with public school kids, and it felt like family was just this incredibly risky bet that almost never pays off. And so I was deeply disillusioned, I would say, by the whole idea. And I was there, and I was very interested in the Old Testament, and so I was excited to study. I went to Israel for just a semester abroad. I was studying modern and ancient Hebrew,
Okay.
and while I was there, I just kept encountering this really bizarre phenomenon, this almost endangered species. And that was a father who actually really, really enjoyed being a dad, wanting to have as many kids as he could. I was like, what are you guys
Wow.
thinking? Like, don't you
Yeah.
know how annoying kids are? Like, I was, and so at first I was just very resistant. I was just like, this is kind of strange. But I remember one day I watched a whole group of dads I was sitting on a bench in Jerusalem. There's a group of dads that were passing, maybe 4 or 5, each one of them pushing a stroller with a bunch of little kids in tow. And I was like, that's so weird. Like, I've seen mommy brigades before. I've never seen a daddy brigade.
Okay.
So I started to dive in, and I started to discover that they thought about fatherhood totally differently than I had ever even considered it. And I started asking, like, where did you guys get this idea of fatherhood? I kept getting this single word response, which was Abraham. And while I was sitting
Okay.
here in a modern kind of culture where, with modern technology, where the dads were primarily thinking about what fatherhood is in its essence, through the narratives in Genesis that feature Abraham.
Wow.
And I had studied Abraham. One of the weird parts of my story is I spent the entire semester before studying Abraham with one of the greatest Abrahamic scholars in the evangelical world in a seminary. And we never once talked about Abraham as a father being somehow applicable to today. Of course, when you
Wow.
say it in Hebrew, you hear it over and over again. Avram, his original name means exalted father. Avraham,
Okay.
his Hebrew name means father of many nations. So they really see Abraham is like this archetype for fatherhood. And Abraham had this really weird passion. He was obsessed with his multi-generational family. He was constantly, praying about it. God, give me a son. His
Yeah.
wife was barren, and God didn't rebuke him and say, "How dare you?" God was like very much working with Abraham and saying, "No, I will make your name great. I will make you this father, this exalted father that your name really promises." So, anyway, what was so weird was both the Arab and Jewish fathers that were in Jerusalem were primarily thinking about the essence of fatherhood through their Abrahamic biblical narratives. But I was a part of a tradition within Christianity. We were also an Abrahamic religion, but we don't do that. Like I had never heard that before, never seen that before. The
Okay.
fathers I knew, we were not designing or thinking about fatherhood from the perspective of Abraham. So I just kind of I attempted a thought experiment, and that was, okay, did God actually preserve these narratives in the book of Genesis and the rest of the scriptures as a way for us to understand the essence of fatherhood? I did that. Yeah, I've never recovered from that one. That completely changed my life. I went from having almost zero interest for kids to just going from like a 1 to a 10, like that.
Yeah. I
So
love
that's
that.
yeah, that's kind of where I came from. Yeah,
I love that. So you look throughout your life now. I mean, as a dad, now as a granddad, congratulations. That's fantastic. That you look back on those decisions. Talk us through a dad who's listening to this and they're saying, "Yeah, I'm not really into that. I'll get married, but I'm not really into this legacy piece right now. I'm too young to be thinking about that. I'm too young to be thinking about integrating fatherhood into my daily life and the impact it can have for passing on faith. I mean, all the things." Talk to that person.
yeah,
What's the aha moment for them that you can share? Maybe a piece of advice or way you've seen that play out in your life.
yeah. Great question. Yeah, so I think one of the questions I would ask this young dad who doesn't care that much about children or legacy, how are you pursuing meaning in your life in general? Like what are the things that constitute the pursuit of meaning in your life?
Okay,
And I think that one of the things that I was shocked by in this exploration is that, and we see this today, like we as men, we really struggle right now with like how are we going to find the meaning? We're
sure.
told to find it through our work, through our friendships, through our hobbies. Why are we choosing those things? Like why is it that like we're pursuing meaning through those things exclusively and not through our faith and our family?
Yeah,
I don't know what else is more meaningful than those two things. And of course, I think faith comes first. But one of the things that's amazing about Christianity is that we do have sort of a very specific description given to the importance of family in our faith, right? You read these weird. I was really struggling with this because when I was starting to hear these fathers who were so interested in their multi-generational family that they really cared about their ancestors, their father, their grandfather, where they came from, their genealogies all the way to their future. They wanted to multiply the number of grandchildren, and they took very seriously these very basic declarations given in the Bible. Like it says in Psalm 127, for example, that children are a blessing from the Lord.
yeah,
They're a heritage from Him. How blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. It actually talks about for young men, blessed is the young man whose quiver is full of them. And in our culture, I think it's important to say, if you're a Christian listening to this, do you believe that? Do you think that when you see a young man with lots of kids, do you go, wow, that guy's so blessed,
yeah. Or
or do
what
you,
mistakes did he make?
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Don't they know how this works or whatever? I get totally why the culture thinks that way. I don't understand why Christians think that way. Now, I do think that what's happened is that a different definition of family has smuggled its way into our faith.
yeah,
There's a Western understanding of family that you don't see in the Middle East, but you see almost exclusively the way we see family in our culture. And is really typified by this word, the nest. You can always tell the way a family thinks about, or by the definition somebody gives something, by what analogy most resonates with them. And so for
okay,
us, we think about families like nests. Nests, by the way, are very maternal kind of idea where you're kind of nurturing the chickies and then it all resets and everybody flies away. And
sure,
so we consider success as a family launching children into a totally independent life. And so in our culture, families tend to have about an 80-year memory. Like if you ask people to list their great grandparents, most people, we all had 8 great grandparents, but almost none of us can list the names of those great grandparents because they don't have any relevance to our lives today.
yeah.
We're experimenting with a very different kind of family, which is this nest version of family. And I think that nest versions of family really don't resonate with men. I think that's the basic problem that men have with the
Okay.
family. And so what we tell them in the Christian culture is, well, do your duty. Like we try to heap responsibility on men and say that's if you're a good man, then you need to. I know it's miserable. I know you're not going to like it, but you got to bear with this for 18 to 20 years, and do a good job raising your kids, have a couple of kids, and then you can move on and be self-focused for the rest of your life. That's kind of the narrative that the culture suggests for people who choose to have kids now that it's becoming increasingly popular just to kind of bypass the whole process and become child free. All of that completely makes sense to me if you given a Western idea of family.
Sure.
This idea of family is just I didn't resonate with me as a man. But what I'm here to tell you is, and I think one of the things that I've enjoyed doing in the last 20 years is just trying to help people understand that there are different ideas of family. So in the Bible, you really have a totally different idea of family. It's not really a nest; it's really a team. And so, like our ministry is called
Yeah.
Family Teams
Yeah.
because what you see is that God actually designed families to work together, and that your work and your ministry and all these other parts of your life are sort of nested underneath your fatherhood, as opposed to fatherhood being sort of this atomized, like closed circle where I have
Sure.
my
Its own
friends, I have
silo.
my
Yeah.
family. Yeah, that's the way we think in our culture. We think about it in very separate categories. Whereas biblically, Abraham, he was always a father, right? This is why
Yeah.
Jesus even calls Abraham Father Abraham. And this is, again, you can see fatherhood and through the lens of Abraham, but once you do that, you see everything nested inside of that. So I don't go to work so that I can escape my family to pursue some other independent individual identity. I go to work to fuel this primary team that I'm a part of. I'm not trying to
Love
look
that.
for another team. I'm
Yeah. Love that
building a team
perspective.
already.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a very different way to see it. Now, I think that resonates with men. I think men, if men were to wake up and suddenly think that they are coaching a team instead of like sitting on a nest, they might get more excited about this idea of family. And
Yeah.
that's why I think it's really a definitional problem.
So talk to us about your family. So you get this vision. Did you do a lineage definition for your family? What is their core values? Is their mission statement? Like, let's get into some of the practical of the way that you're raising your family for the legacy of the Pryors, as you're now a grandparent with the expectation for this to continue. What does that look like?
Yeah. So I really see the 18 years you have your children in your home. It's not the beginning and the end of fatherhood or family. You really have 18 years of time to enlist your children in the family mission.
Cool.
So that's a lot of time. And so all five of my kids are very excited to be part of the family. I only have one now that's under 18. So the rest
Okay.
of our kids are older. Like I said, three are married. All of us are on the same mission as a family. We're all like our family mission statement is we multiply multipliers. So we're all excited about making disciples who make disciples
Yeah, I
and
love that.
turning sons and daughters into fathers and mothers. That's we love this mission. Now this is not a mission just given to our family. We really got this straight from the two commissions in the Bible. There's the commission given to family in Genesis 1:28.
Yeah.
We're told that a family has a 5-part mission to be fruitful, multiply, fill, subdue, and rule. That's the purpose statement given to every single family. Every single person listening to this that has a family, even if you're not married, you're still a part of a family. Your
Sure.
family's mission is to do these 5 things. And then Jesus really says the exact same thing. He says to be fruitful, multiply, fill, subdue, and rule through disciple making, right? Discipling all the nations. That's the way we subdue. And we multiply through making disciples who make disciples. And so those are the two elements that we really feel very excited to do as a family. And so we're constantly training others. Now we get unique assignments along the way that are unique
Sure.
to our family, but that's the general mission as I see it that every family is given if they are a believer in Jesus.
I love that. So then when you're working with families, specifically, let's talk to the dads again. What does that look like when you're helping coach them to take this mentality into their specific home, change the trajectory of their entire family legacy, right? That they may not have come from this, but they can extend this out into their family. What do those steps look like?
Yeah. So it starts with you. Like as the father, you have to get excited about this. Like your kids can only experience their sonship or daughterhood to the extent that you're willing to experience your fatherhood. And this was really
Okay, hold on,
challenging for
hold on,
me.
hold on. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's say that one more time. Just in
Yes.
case anybody skipped over that, missed it, say that one more time.
Yeah. Your children can only experience their sonship and daughterhood to the extent that you embrace your fatherhood.
Love
Right.
that.
Those that being a son or being a daughter is specifically in relation to a father and a mother.
Yeah.
And I think that what happens is we subtly are rejecting this this role. And I think there's, like I said, there's good reason to be skeptical of it or to reject it. I
Sure.
didn't want to sit on a nest either. I wasn't excited like about the way like the nurturing family. I wasn't built for that. I wanted to build things. Like I had a lot of energy. I had a lot of goals as a father and as a man, and they needed to fit inside of family and fatherhood in order for me to experience that. And so that's why for me, I had to start by just putting on this hat, this fatherhood hat, and say, okay, what I'm building here is a family. I'm not primarily trying to build a work identity or some other identity. So I had to first embrace this identity. One of the reasons that's kind of new that I've noticed too, that people don't understand that as soon as you have a child, you become something beyond your own individual identity. You really become a symbol to that, to that child,
Sure.
right? And again, like if they're going to experience sonship or daughterhood, you got to experience your fatherhood. You got to embrace that. A lot of us look at that like, I don't like the idea of fatherhood. I almost have an aesthetic like revulsion to it. Maybe because you've had bad experiences of it.
Sure.
But of course, we know that kids are going to experience their relationship with God as a father to the extent that they're going to immediately analogize their relationship with you to that relationship with God, at some level. Now, we're all going to imperfectly reflect that. And I totally struggle with that. Like, how do I do this well?
Yeah.
But I think embracing this, and this is what was shocking to me about so many of these cultures in the Middle East, was that it was sort of everyone I ran into, all the men, especially the middle-aged men that I ran into, they all love the idea of fatherhood. And so this symbol, they looked up to their father, they looked up to their grandfathers, their sons looked up to them. It was a culture where fatherhood was really aspirational. And that again, coming from Seattle, that really shocked me because
Sure.
I just saw in the culture that fatherhood was just constantly being made fun of and denigrated, and so this was a real transition I had to go through in my own heart. Like I had to repent and believe. I had to like say, okay, God, I know you designed this role of fatherhood for a reason, and man, I want to embrace this. And part of it for me, like I said, was kind of understanding that my definition of family was so maternal that there wasn't a very clear place for me in that idea of family. But once you define family as a team, once in the way that we describe the Western family is like it's a springboard for individual success. That's the way we see it. That's the
Okay.
nest version.
Okay.
But the biblical family is a multi-generational team on mission. I'm excited to build that. Like, so I just need somebody to tell me that. Like, God designed family not to be a springboard for individual success. It sort of hits the reset button every generation. You launch the chickies out. Okay, that's great. But if I'm doing that, I'm going to give it a little bit of attention. I'll try to love my kids well. I'll try to provide, but I'm not going to love it. I'm probably going to go join other teams. I'm going to root for other teams. But if you tell me that what a family is a multi-generational team on mission where I get missions from my grandfather, my father, I get to pass it on my sons and daughters, my son, like if I'm a part of this legacy
Yeah.
and we're a team and we're given a really valuable mission to get to not only like experience that mission as an individual, but man, I get to experience it with the people that mean the most to me in life. My wife, my kids, my grandchildren, potentially my parents, if that's healthy. Wow. Like, okay, I'm all in. Like, I'll do that. That sounds amazing. And so I had to have that paradigm shift first. So that's the first step. You have to decide what kind of family you're building. And if you want to build a multi-generational team mission, then you're going to find your heart is going to wake up to the idea of fatherhood. And then there's all kinds of tools we can talk about that'll really help propel that family, but it's got to start there in your own heart.
Yeah, I love that. And as the leader, right, God calls us in leading in our
Yep.
families to take that initiative. And so I love that we're speaking to the dads here.
Yes.
I love that you also touched on the fact that so much of our relationship with our Heavenly Father is at least initially aligned with the relationship we have with our earthly father. And
Yeah.
I've been very blessed. I look back to my granddads and my earthly dad and the relationship that they have with the Lord, the way that they taught me what it meant to be a man, the initiatives that they gave me. I love that. But I love this perspective of, okay, let's tie it into an entire mission around what we're doing together as a team, bringing
Yes.
everybody involved. Because then, when the kids get out of the house, you're no longer passionless, right? That
Right.
you're able to continue to stay on mission and invest time as a couple in your family and your grandkids and your parents if they're still alive. All these things that we get to do. I love that perspective. So a man's hit listen to this, a dad's listen to this and says, I'm game. Jeremy, I hear you. Matthew, I hear you. I see this vision. I see this idea of me taking on that role as the dad. I didn't grow up with this, but my kids will. What's their next step? So they've accepted it. They've said, I got it. I'm on board. I'm on fire. Let's do it. How do they get their family involved? Do you start with your spouse? Do you start with your kids? What's kind of the next conversation they have?
Yeah. So if you think about family as a multi-generational team on mission, if you open your toolbox for building that kind of family in a Western culture, it's going to be empty because every tool we have to parent children are really designed around the individual. Schools are individualistic. Most church ministries separate everyone by kind of life stage group or age. Sports, do that. So even entertainment now is starting to get separated. Our social media platform, it's like, okay,
Sure.
depending on what generation you're in or how old you are. So you need a new set of tools. And so I'll throw out three tools, Matthew. We can drill into any of these. But for each of those three words, multi-generational team and mission. So if we're defining family as a multi-generational team on mission, there's a tool for each. So the tool for multi-generational is the table. We can drill into that.
Yeah.
There's a way in which you can wield the table that will create a multi-generational family.
Let's start with there. Yeah, let's start there.
Okay.
I love it.
Yeah. So I learned this in, living in Jerusalem. So we've lived there for, I lived there, met my wife there. Then we moved back there and lived there for on and off for about 3 years. And I have been totally enamored with the sort of this tradition that Jewish families use called the Sabbath or Shabbat dinner. So most Western families, we have this like Thanksgiving dinner, maybe a Christmas dinner, where the generations come together once or twice a year.
Sure.
And oftentimes this sort of we joke about how miserable it is because we hardly see each other and we're all in completely separate worlds, different political stances, maybe different religions coming together, trying to survive this multi-generational meal.
Yeah.
Now, and so a lot of people are like, well, it can't possibly be an amazing thing. No, it's like, imagine a culture. And this is what I experienced when I was in Jerusalem. It's just crazy. So the Shabbat siren goes off and it's really interesting that Friday before Shabbat. So Shabbat, the Sabbath for Jewish families starts on Friday night and they all kick it off with a meal, right? Because in the Genesis 1, it says there was evening and morning the first day. So their day starts in the evening. So when the sun sets, everyone needs to be around that table. One of the things you see that happens is there's a flurry of activity on Friday where, a lot of the couples in their 30s or even 40s are rushing to their parents' house to get there in time for Shabbat dinner. And then the siren goes off and you're in Jerusalem. It's just like everything's just quiet. The only thing you can kind of hear is the sound of fathers chanting blessings over their sons,
Wow.
mothers chanting blessings over their daughters. So we experienced this, multiple times, and it's not surprising, honestly, that if the pinnacle of your week, and this is really the way it's designed within a Jewish family, the pinnacle of their week, they really prepare for this Sabbath dinner the way that we would prepare for like a Thanksgiving.
Sure.
Like, so everyone they have nowhere better to go. Nothing else is planned. Everyone is there, and you got and you bless the children. The husband blesses his wife. You have this incredible meal together. You just linger at the table, and you tell stories about the family. You might play games. Man, it's just an incredible timeless thing. And so when I was starting to have kids, I remember I had this memory. This was before we'd moved back there, but I was there, as a student when I was single. And I think my kids were, my oldest might have been 7 years old.
Okay.
And our family I was really struggling as a dad. Like I was just a season. I was like trying to start my second or third business. I was super busy. I was watching like there was sort of a lot of tension between me and my wife. Like I was feeling like disconnected from my kids. And I had this like flashback of what life was like when I lived in Jerusalem. Like, how did those dads do it? Oh, they had this Shabbat dinner. So I remember driving to, I think it was like J.C. Penney or whatever, drove to the mall, just like literally bought this box of the ugliest dishes you've ever saw, but they looked really different. It's like,
I love that.
I can't believe I bought these things, but I just wanted it to feel different. Like we're going to do the Shabbat dinner thing. So, and then I got like this sparkling grape juice, got home, like I kind of pitched this idea to my wife. I'm like, let's just try this. So we did this kind of Shabbat dinner, very badly. I even tried to look up some Hebrew blessings and my halting memories of how to speak Hebrew. Anyway, after that, I kind of forgot it the next week, and my kids were like, "Hey, well, can we do that sparkling grape juice thing?"
Yeah, cool.
And I was
I
like,
love that.
"Oh!" And so then we did it again, and we kind of on and off the first year. And this was, like I said, it was almost 20 years ago. now it's been a part of our family for all this time, and we have really rooted in this tradition. And what I've discovered is that when you do this, you can't stop a multi-generational family from starting, because my kids now, they're growing up with this meal and they can't imagine not bringing
Yeah.
their kids to this meal.
I
My
love that
parents,
perspective.
they,
Yeah.
they my wife's parents were living, few hundred miles away. My parents were living a couple thousand miles away. But when they come into town, they would come and join this dinner. Well, they were so honored as a part of this tradition that I think it really caught their heart and was part of the reason when they both relocated to live closer to us. And then over time, we learned how to, like, once a month they were coming to our Shabbat dinners, then every other week, then every week, and so we just got more and more filled with life. And so that's kind of the tradition that launched for us. But I would say, and as my kids got into high school, I remember my daughter Kelsey, she was in high school. Her friends were all heading off to, the Friday night football game, and she would always want to stay for the Shabbat dinner. She'd bring her friends
Wow.
to the Shabbat dinner, and
Yeah,
then
I
maybe she'd
love
go to
that.
the game and then come right back because we live like cross street from the high school. But it just was like a magnet, like just drew our family together. And so that's the first tool. And I would say the main one, if you start that, even if you can't involve upstream generations because there's something unhealthy there, if you design this in such a way that your kids want to be a part of this and they want their kids to be a part of it, a multi-generational family, this Abrahamic family I'm describing, this will just naturally start to emerge.
Yeah. So in your Shabbat dinner, are you doing specific things like the Hebrew prayer still? Are you still doing some of those blessings, or is it just, hey, we're gonna, like Thanksgiving, get together intentionally and eat together as a family once a week?
Yeah, I can walk you through a night at the Pryor Shabbat table.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, it was fun. So the daughters all they do an amazing job. Now, again, we started with like paper plates, Chipotle, like
Sure.
whatever we needed
Yeah,
to do,
sure.
like to just serve when we had little kids. But we have adult kids now that are really good at this, and so they've been trained in it their whole lives. They love it. So the way we start, the daughters just beautify the table. I mean, and I just love that my daughters know how to beautify a table, the tablecloth, the flowers, the place settings. They really think about it. I love cooking the main dish, so I work on that,
Okay.
and then we all kind of work on the dinner together. Then the way everybody comes over in our typical Shabbat dinner, there's about 15 of us, so it's us, our adult kids, our grandkids, my parents, my wife's mom. Her dad was a part of it while he was alive.
Okay.
And so that's kind of our Shabbat squad, we call it. Everybody who comes. My nephew Clayton is usually there. Sometimes other extended family members will be able to come, aunts or other nephews or nieces. And then the way we kick it off is we light a candle. And so I always start by just sort of so we have a candle that's special. It's kind of set apart for our Shabbat
Okay.
dinner. And so when I first was getting those ugly dishes, I went to Yankee Candle and I just went in and asked the lady, "Hey, is there some kind of scent here that you guys are so into that will never be retired?" And she took me to this one scent. She's like, "Yeah, this one is way too
It's
popular.
a
This will never go away."
great
Yeah, it's
point.
called Sage and Citrus. So I was like, okay, well, that's now our holy Shabbat. Now, I didn't realize Jewish families, they just use nice white candles because you don't want something scented at your dinner, I guess. But anyway, we love the scents because we want our house to have a different smell on Shabbat. So
Yeah, I love
anyway,
that
we so
perspective.
so we light the candle. So the youngest person in the family. So I have a little jar full of like reflections, about
Okay.
20 different like themes that like basically help us enter into the gospel. Like for
Sure.
us, we feel zero obligation to keep the Sabbath from the perspective of the law.
Sure.
We're Gentiles. We're in the new covenant. But I also want to make sure that we're tying rest to what Jesus did on the cross
Yeah.
for us. And so I have about 20 different little like quotes and different ways to do that. So the oldest kid who can read will read that, and we'll it has a little question. So I just want, let's enter into right now. This moment is sacred to us, and let's tell the gospel. So we do that. Then there's the oldest lady of the house that lives in our house. So that would be, usually my wife. She'll light the candle. The youngest child, like my grandson, will pass the scent around so everybody can smell it, and then we light it and we just say Shabbat Shalom. So when the candle's lit, like it's like we're inside of Shabbat. There's a little Shabbat Shalom song that we sing, and then we bless the sons. So I wrote this little kind of riff on the Jewish blessing, which is just, may God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh, and give you the faith of Abraham, the heart of David, and the righteousness of Christ as you build our family from generation to generation.
I love
And
that.
then the oldest matriarch in the family, usually my mom. So my dad usually says that blessing over me, and he usually has 4 generations present. Like I'm
Wow.
his second, and then my son Jackson's his third, and then my grandson Elijah, my dad's great grandson is there. So he's blessing all the way down to the 4th generation. And then my mom does something similar. She's got two great granddaughters now on our side of the family. So she will bless, or my mother-in-law will bless. May God make you like Leah, and or make you like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. May he give you the heart of Ruth, the faith of Mary, and the righteousness of Christ as you build our family from generation to generation. So we do these blessings. Sometimes we do the Proverbs 31 blessing over the wives.
Okay.
And so once we're done, then we, go around the table. We start the feast. So we really do it up. Like I love now, gotten really into different cooking. And
Yeah, cool.
so oftentimes we'll have a conversation at the table. If there's prompts we can give to the kind of older generation to tell stories. And so, yeah, there's lots of different things to do about that. Yeah. And then I'll often will end the dinner with kind of a little discussion on a little segment of the gospel. So I do a discovery Bible study on the gospels every week with a group of guys. So I just grab that passage and retell that. It's part of the story. And yeah, then we have a pickleball court. So we usually, during this time of year, we'll go back, play pickleball as a family. Sometimes during the winter, we'll play games. And so, yeah, that's kind of a typical night Shabbat dinner.
That's fantastic. So typically, how long is this from start to finish?
Yeah, we kick off at 6, and it goes as long as it needs to, but usually like 9:30. We have a dessert usually, at some point during the evening. Yeah.
I love that. And what I love so much. So one of the things that I did for our family when Hannah and I got married and we were buying our first house is I secretly made her a farmhouse table. And it was so fun. It was so fun to give her. And I can remember praying over the table for these type conversations, right? That as we grew our family, it was that it would be a place that we could host friends, host family, and have conversations. And that's the reason this podcast is, this theme of the podcast is called The Family Table. It's this idea of how do we surround each other around this place that can be a staple point in the life. I'm thankful that I had family dinners growing up, and I can look back over my friends that did not, and there's a clear difference in the relationship they have with their parents and the relationship I have in mine, right? And so we camp a lot as a family, and we do that. We do multiple generations around the campfire, and we have some of these. But we personally, Hannah and I, will definitely be adapting a lot of this into our weekly family connections, especially as we move into bringing my parents in, bringing my brother in, bringing additional folks into the weekly family dinners. I'm so excited for that. Okay, so we have the family table. What's next?
Yeah. So if the family is a multi-generational team on mission, then you have to be a team. One of the elements that I think you need to start to establish is the father coach role. So a big part of what I think wakes fathers up is to be a coach. And I think one way to think about this is how much men are designed, I think, to be coaches. Is I always do this thought experiment, which is, imagine if we passed this law. I'm not recommending this, but just as a thought experiment, if we passed a law that every single family had to compete with another family every Saturday, let's say, on some kind of sport, similar families against similar families. And so they had to compete in some sport, and the score and the winners and all of that would be made public. What would happen to the degree of engagement a father would have towards his family?
Sure.
Now I think that men are designed to coach, and I'm not particularly sporty, but I get how much we are built to lead teams. And when a mother signs, her daughter or her son up for a sport, she's going to expect more intentional engagement from that coach than from that child's father during that season.
Sure.
Because we understand how that works. And so if you've ever had a really good coach, like that's really understood, and I think the essence of good coaching, there's a great book called The Culture Code. Daniel Coyle wrote it, and one of the things that it's not a family book or fatherhood book, but it's probably my favorite book on fatherhood, because he does the best job I've ever read on how to unpack what a great coach is like. And one of the things that he describes that a great coach does is raises the bar of what he calls like support and like expectation or high demand at the same time.
Yeah.
We all tend to be kind of similar. Like I tend to be a high support, low demand dad.
Sure.
There's some of you might have had a father who's like really high demand but low support. Your B+ was never good enough. And so, but if you ever had a great coach, it's usually when they really know what you're capable of. Like they're not going to push you past, some unreasonable limit. But they're going to really train you to reach what you can get to in a way that you want to receive because you know they care about you and
I
they're
love
there
that.
and they support you. And this is the essence of, when Paul had one thing to say to fathers in Ephesians 6, he said, fathers, train up your children in the instruction of the Lord, but don't exasperate them. In other words, understand how to train your kids up, right? But don't push them past this line that a good coach understands where they get discouraged. And so there's a constant need to be coaching and training up our children, but not in a way that creates that discouragement. So understanding that role, but one of the challenges that we have is like, where's the arena for that? It's like where does a dad coach his kids in a world in which all sports tend to be, just very age specific. And so
Sure.
I've been obsessed with this question. And so as we were raising our kids, we did find some sports that we could do as a full family. We had a whole season where we did tennis together.
Oh,
We
nice.
did
Yeah,
4
cool.
years of taekwondo together.
Okay.
Now we do pickleball together. I got a friend, if you go to familykickball.com, he's actually designed a fascinating set of rules that allows families of any size and at any age to compete against other families
I love
in a way that really does feel competitive. And so
Yeah.
there's whole leagues now starting of family kickball leagues.
Yeah, cool.
We need to figure out a way to like experience this coaching, and we need our kids to experience our love and development of them as their father.
I love that. So let me ask a question that always gets kind of brought up around this coaching aspect. At least for me, I've seen this far too often with my friends. I catch myself when my boys get into sports. I definitely saw it growing up with dads that they're living vicariously through their sons. And
Yes.
maybe they weren't as good of an athlete and their son has the potential to be, and they're just driving, driving, driving. What
Yes.
happens, at least the experience I have, when you speak to them one on one, they're not seeing it that way. Their blinders are on and they're seeing my son has potential. I'm encouraging him. I'm pushing him. I'm having the high demand. I want to have high support too. But how do we encourage fathers? How do we prevent them from taking it too far? What
Yeah.
advice would you have there?
I feel like, and this kind of gets to the third thing we're gonna, that I would recommend. It
Look at
part
that
of that is
segue.
to
Look at that
be
segue. How do we
yes.
tell us about the mission?
There's a mission confusion. Like you're developing your kids, so there's a meaning problem that a lot of these fathers have. There's sort of a gap in their own heart,
Yeah,
right? That's happening, and they really think that they're getting meaning from their kids' performance, and so they want to feel that. And yeah, I do think that's dangerous because your kids are going to sense that, and they're going to know there's something selfish about that, and there's going to be a sort of a father wound created by that kind of a thing. I think that one way that you can avoid that is to make clear what the family mission is. There are things that we should be driving our families to do. There are things that are worth, living for, and there are even things worth dying for, but it's not sports.
yeah. Amen.
So we've got to take our family on a mission, and we got to make clear what those things are, and that what's happening in those sports is really our kids are developing the kinds of character qualities that will help them achieve their mission. But you don't want to do that in a way that replaces the mission. You
Sure.
don't want to suggest that that's subtly the mission, or now that is the mission. And you can do that as a father just simply by overemphasizing its importance.
I love
But I
that.
think that one way to deal with this is, instead of dialing down your love for the sport, dial up your love for the mission. That I think I love that sort of framing, that the best way to sort of get over a good mission or a good love is to make sure that you are focusing your eyes on a great love.
Yeah.
Like, so part of that for us has been, and this is again another thing that's been challenging, is just to make really clear what our family's mission is, like what we care about. And it really is those two things I started with, which is the Genesis 1:28 mission. So we're trying to build the kind of family God designed family to build, to be fruitful, multiply, fill, subdue, and rule. So we see that as that whole 5-part thing is, really critical. So fruitful means that we need to have children. So we had 5 kids. Multiply is to have grandchildren. And a lot of people think they have no impact on whether or not their kids have kids. But you have 18 years to get your kids aligned with the godly mission, a biblical
Sure.
mission. And so we really raised our kids we weren't focused on their happiness. We were focused on the happiness of our future grandchildren. And so
Cool.
I think a
I
better way
love
to
that
parent
perspective.
kids is to parent your kids to become great parents of your future grandchildren. Like, and so if you're watching a character quality, you're like, oh my gosh, that's gonna really hurt, you know, their son or daughter someday, instead of saying, well, at least they're happy. It's like,
Yeah.
that's how you create a
Yeah.
terminal generation in your family
Yeah,
line.
but
At
it's a
least they're
different
happy.
perspective. It's a much different
Yes.
perspective when we're having these conversations with our kids. For me, with my boys, right? We have all boys. We have four boys,
Yes.
and there's some
Yes.
conversations we keep having over and over and over. And I love that perspective, though. It's okay. I'm having this conversation today. I'm investing this time continually to help correct this character issue, flaw, concern within you, because I don't want you to transfer that over to my grandkids.
Exactly.
I love that perspective. Okay, so
Yes.
you're fruitful, you multiply. Keep going.
Yeah. And then he says, fill, subdue, and rule. So fill has to do with God's command for us to take territory, like expand territorially, right? He didn't want them just staying in Eden. He wanted them to spread the boundaries of the Garden of Eden. You can do that through saturating a region, or you could do that through expanding to new regions and staying very connected as a family team. And so we're open to whichever kind of filling that our kids feel called to do.
Cool.
When our kids were single, we were very adamant, like, please, like, expand the family. Like, you have this unusual opportunity to live what Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 7 as this undivided life. And so our kids all went on, mission trips and things that were fairly long and intense during their
Cool.
single years. And then he says subdue, which I really see as you begin to take control of areas of influence within your area. So
Okay.
these are businesses, ministries, like, you want your family to expand its influence because you're a godly family that is being fruitful, multiplying, and is following the Lord. And then ultimately, he wants families or households to rule. He wants
Yeah.
us to be engaged, at that kind of governance level, so that the justice of God, the righteousness of God, the gospel of our Lord gets saturated in everything that happens within our communities. And so we want to be part of that. But that is the job of the family. He gave that mission to the family. And then Jesus, like I mentioned, he recapitulates this mission. This was, God gave this mission in an unfallen world. I don't think that means that we no longer do that, but we basically need a retaking the world strategy.
Sure.
That's really what Jesus outlines in the Great Commission in Matthew 28, where he says, all authority has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples, which is the command to be fruitful. And then he tells them that these disciples need to make disciples, right? That teach them to obey everything. So this is the command to multiply, right? To not just make disciples, but make disciple makers. And so part of what we want to be doing is training our household to be on mission to make disciples who make disciples. And then, of course, he tells them to go to all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. This is the mission to fill. And the baptism is really the mission to subdue, right? Where
Yeah.
others are coming under the lordship of Christ.
Yeah.
And then ultimately to rule. And who's going to rule? Christ himself as king, where he tells them, teach them to obey everything I've commanded you. This is the kingly command of Christ that he wants to rule. And this is the process through which ruling takes place. We don't conquer people against their will. We disciple people who make disciples. And so when we think about, like, what is the real game that the family is playing? Is it the sports? Is it financial accumulation? Is it comfort? Because these are all dangerous substitutes for the real mission given to the family in both of these passages. So Genesis 1:28 gives the essence of the original family mission that's still operating. And then Matthew 28 gives us the Great Commission, which is the current mission that every believer is on.
Yeah.
But there's a special way that families can live that out.
Yeah.
We can do that through discipling our own children, but we also need to multiply disciples of believers in our communities.
I love that. So, Jeremy, we're coming up to the end of our time. I could talk to you all day. This is incredible. One thing I want to close on, this idea, you talked about it earlier, that we have the family mission, but our family members get different assignments as they go, right?
Yes.
Talk to us just a little bit about that. I'm very interested in this idea of seeing things within my sons, and then getting the confirmation of, like, this is the assignment that the Lord's assigning to them in this season of their life or for the rest of their life. Give us some insight on that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so exciting to see that the unique gifts God gives each of your kids. And every one of those gifts is a clue that there's an element of the family mission or an assignment given to that family that child needs to participate in. So, like, my wife, she's fluent in sign language. So we often
Wow.
have seasons where we have a unique outreach to the deaf community. We've, as a family, had these seasons in Israel where God has called us. We had lots of clients through our business there, so we were able to do a lot of ministry there. That was a huge blessing, and our kids have felt called there. My son-in-law, lived in Israel for a while. My daughter went over there. So there's locations or places in the world that God sometimes gives you and then your family, your kids can learn, foreign languages that are unique to those places. My daughter Elisa, her calling is just, she's very artistic, all things beauty. She plays the harp. She's incredibly creative, and so we're always like, I'm looking for these avenues for her to get to experience ministry, and our family get behind all of those gifts that she has. All three of my sons are in construction, and so this is another element of our family mission. I can't fix anything, and so it hasn't been something that I brought into the family at all.
Oh, I
But I
love that.
mean, it's amazing to see what they're going to create, and then what kind of, like, what this could mean. Because I couldn't steward land. I didn't know how to. I just didn't have the mechanical abilities to do like lots of upkeep. Now I have sons that really are, I think, called to that. So yeah, as I look at each of our kids, they all have amazing gifts. My daughter Sydney is super into fiction. She's got a great YouTube channel where she's like, really breaking, down stories. And she and I
Cool.
have a podcast where we walk through this stuff together. So
Yeah, cool.
yeah, each of my kids has, they all have elements of these different missions that really come like, what are the problems that really hit you more strongly than they hit other people? Are there gifts? Are there places? These are kind of clues to if there's a unique calling on your family.
Sure. I love that. And I love the overarching, like this is where we're going as a family. So this is what we can rally cry. This is the clarity behind the lens at which we evaluate different opportunities as a family, and then encouraging our sons, for me specifically, our sons
Yeah.
to evaluate life that way, to get them connected into the family mission. Man, I love this so much. So Jeremy, please don't give us a cell phone number. But somebody hears you talking and they absolutely love it. I know you're very active on social media. Please give
Yeah.
us the contacts for social media. They want to know more. I know you've got some books, some resources. How do they get connected to you? How do they find out more?
Yeah. Yeah. If you want to go deep in the paradigm, I wrote a book called Family Revision that's on Audible, or you can download it or Kindle or whatever. So Family Revision is helpful. Familyteams.com is kind of like the hub for all the things, that we got lots of social media. I have an accelerator where I coach families that are going through this transition that's a year long. I also coach families through a thing called Family Inc., where if they want to start doing work as a family, like if you want to kind of move out of a career-based idea into more asset building, I take about 100 families a year on in a coaching program with me and a bunch of other coaches and that have done this. And we've got about 30, now over 30 ideas of business models that are working for other family teams that we think work in
Wow.
other parts of the country. So I think we
Love
need to
that.
work together as a kind of a community to figure out how to do that. If you're really interested in the disciple making stuff I described, if you go to 1kh.org, I coach families that are trying to turn their household into a hub of disciple making. Very passionate about that. That's really a huge focus of mine here in Cincinnati. So yeah, that'll get you started.
I love that. Yeah, that's fantastic. I'll make sure all those are in the show notes. Jeremy, brother, I thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for following through with this paradigm shift, right? So many people get a vision, get an idea. We say this a lot on the business part of this podcast, that there's so many entrepreneurs, right? There's so many people that have an idea and they never go from 0 to 1. They never
Yeah.
take action. And so thank you for taking action. Thank you for sharing today. I'm just glad to know you. I'm glad for this conversation. It's been encouraging to me, and I look forward to staying in touch. Thank you, everybody, for pulling up a seat at the family table. We'll see you soon. Thank you for pulling up a chair at the family table. We hope today's conversation has strengthened the bonds that hold us together. Don't forget to follow the show to keep these heartwarming stories coming your way. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe and share it with friends and family. And if there's someone whose family story you think would be a perfect fit for the show, drop their name in the comments. We would love to hear from you and bring more families to the table. Until next time, cherish those moments with your loved ones.